This is Get Inspired with Dr. Barb. Hello, everyone. This is Barbara Vocatus, host of Get Inspired with Dr. Barb, podcast on education, innovation in education. I would like to welcome you, a wonderful audience. I know that all of you are interested in education. You want to hear about possible changes, coming changes, new initiatives, and we value you for that. And please make sure to follow the show so you don't miss an episode. And always please get involved with conversation, whether it is on social media. I would like to remind you, I am on Spotify, Apple, and also on YouTube, and that's where this episode is going to go. I believe that we can substantially change education if we make changes for those who are in special need, and that includes really anybody who struggles in school. And I think about neurodivergent populations, but sometimes we have students in the system, in the educational system, who might not be labeled special needs, but we have no excuse as far as educating children and making sure that their education is the best we can give them. And today's guest is absolutely amazing because she doesn't just know about special education, how to help the children. She is right on the front line, really, I have to say it, leading the change and innovation in this area. Because I believe you don't always have to overthrow the whole system, but you can make changes within the system. But I haven't seen it, so that's kind of scary. You can have a bad system, but really cool people, teachers, right? Caring ones, and you in a different position. But should we rely on that kind of luck? As a parent of an autistic child, it's like praying the next year the teacher will be cool, caring, and understanding. I mean, that's what these parents do. It's like, oh my God, who is my kid is going to get? I'm going to tell you a little bit about my guest today, who's connecting from England. So Terri Wyse is a special school head teacher, SEND specialist, and SEND, that has something to do with special education, but not only, she can explain to us because we don't use this term SEND in United States, and founder of Wyse Inclusion, with a background in psychology and experience across both mainstream and specialist education. And that is really cool to see this wide scope of systems. She has dedicated her career to helping children and young people with disabilities and other challenges thrive, develop independence, and successfully prepare for adult life. Because that's what education is meant to be. But it is not always the case, because if we look at the numbers and percentage of just even only neurodivergent kids such as autistic group, I think the numbers are horrible. 80% of these kids, or even above, depending on the country, they have never worked. They are not working. So, and they went through education system, sometimes all the way to the graduation. So what's happening? I mean, this is a simple question. And if it doesn't add up, then it does not give a good assessment to the educational system. That's what I have to say. It's common sense. And it's even math, right? So over the years, she has worked as a teacher, SENCO senior leader, and head teacher leading innovative SEND provision for pupils and a wide range of needs, including moderate learning difficulties, autism, emotionally based school anxiety, and complex learning needs. And I've seen myself how anxiety can shut down children as little as from kindergarten, first grade. So if you're already starting in that way, how are you going to progress and feel that education empowers you throughout the rest of the years? We need to ask these questions. She has also helped develop specialists and satellite provisions that bring together the best of special and mainstream education to create more inclusive opportunities for young people. Alongside her school leadership role, she founded Wyse Inclusion to support schools in strengthening inclusive practice and finding practical, sustainable solutions to the challenges facing these children in education really today. And she's particularly passionate about inclusion, reducing barriers to attendance, supporting families, and helping young people with SEND access meaningful employment and fulfilling adult lives. And I have to really mention here super quick, I mean, absenteeism, attendance, it's a huge roadblock. My kid, that happened to my kid in high school when they were not able to basically get up and get ready and go to school. And then you need to figure out how to understand that, what's happening, and how to explain it to people in school. So that's what us parents we have to go through. And she has this understanding. And she's also a writer, contributor on SEND and education. And she enjoys working with school leaders, educators, and employers to think differently about inclusion and create better outcomes for all children and young people. Welcome, Terri, on my show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. And thanks for reaching out.
You're very welcome. I know that I found you on Instagram,
Yeah.
and once I did, I thought, oh my goodness, I haven't found anybody like that in the United States on social media, because these thoughts, ideas, they have to be promoted out there in various ways. That's just how it is in today's world to reach other people. But you have just not just an incredible background, but you're doing some real things. You involved in some effort to actually make a change for these children. But first, I would like to ask you a little bit about why you are particularly interested in this group of children and working towards improving education for them. What led to this incredible passion?
So I suppose it goes really way back to when I was young myself, and I'm not sure exactly where it came from, but even as a teenager, I wanted to work with disadvantaged young people. And I remember being around 15 years of age and thinking about being a social worker. But then I started to study psychology and a little bit of sociology and kind of got swept away with a lot of interest in that particular area. And then once I'd finished my degree in psychology, I decided that at that point in time, I wanted to be a child psychotherapist. So I did a qualification in psychotherapy, but in the evenings, and had to earn some money just to get by. You know, I'd just finished my degree and needed to bring some money in. So I decided in the interim it would be good experience to get a job as a learning support assistant in a secondary school. And I just loved working with the children in the special educational needs department. I had huge respect for the SENCO, the educational needs coordinator, and just in that space of a year, really found my place and never looked back really. I had never thought about being a teacher. And I knew that if I was going to become a teacher, it would need to be specifically to teach children with special educational needs. And it was definitely, the motivation was child first, as opposed to the love of sharing the knowledge of a subject. It was more about helping and supporting our most disadvantaged children to enjoy education. I always loved learning, and I wanted to make sure that any barriers that were in place for those children were broken down as much as possible. And so the SENCO at the time told me that I could, instead of going back to uni to become a teacher, I could go through what was called the graduate teacher program at the time in the UK. And I then, because I was moving back to my parents at that point in time, just wrote to a number of secondary schools in the area and said, would anybody be willing to support me through the graduate teacher program? And a wonderful SENCO, another school, gave me the opportunity, somebody that I'm still in touch with today. And I learnt so much in those first 6 years as I was getting my qualification, and just really loved it. Really, you know, it's really meaningful work. It's tough, but it's so valuable. So that's kind of how I developed that career path and that passion. And then it was only later when I'd been teaching in secondary mainstream school for a number of years. Then I moved schools and I'd done my master's degree in education, became a SENCO myself. And then became a little bit disenchanted with the mainstream system, felt that it wasn't child-centered enough,
Yeah.
and that the push was always on the children that were the higher achievers.
Mhm.
There were things, when you say about things not changing, there were things that were an issue for me then in mainstream that I still, when I look at and talk to mainstream colleagues, they're still there. The issues that, it's so driven towards pushing children through exam qualifications and feeling that that's the biggest goal, that's the biggest aim. And at that point, I just felt that I needed to try at least working in the special school sector to give it a go and see if it felt different and what it was like. And I had a friend of mine that worked at a special school that I'd actually met doing my master's degree, and a job had come up. And so I went for it, and I've been there for 17 years now. So I really did find a place of work that gave me the level of challenge, but also the luxury. I always call it a luxury to be child-centered and look at designing curriculum around children, specifically the ones that are in front of you, and looking at what do they need from their learning, and also to not worry about league tables. So in the UK, all the schools have league tables, and you've got Ofsted and all of that, and we still are Ofsteded, but we don't have to teach the national curriculum exactly as it is, and we don't get measured in quite the same way regarding pupil achievement and qualifications. I've just loved it, and I love the young people, and I love the fact that the staff that work in special school, particularly, I feel, are there purely for the children, and they really do go above and beyond every day to help and support those children.
This is amazing because that is really, I think sometimes people in the system, in the regular system, they might not see what you can do, what can be done to change it. If you are in the same system, then your vision obviously is kind of limited, but you get a chance to work in a totally different system with a different curriculum. And you have seen what dedication also from teachers, because the human aspect is absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
I remember every time when my kid did good, it was something to do with the teacher who was willing to, who'd be like sensitive more, be interested in my kid, seeing the value in a different child, right? And understand that, because we still have the issues of really, really pushing for just only one type of intelligence, right? That's why the testing and all that stuff. We're talking about the system is not changing according to what we already know from research, to be honest. So that gave you an incredible opportunity to see what's wrong in other system. And I would like to ask you, what do you think are like the major things? It can be systemic, but also there's other probably reasons. The major issues, blocks, whatever you call it, obstacles, rocks in mainstream system. We already touched on it a little bit, like how it pushes for certain performance, right? What are those like three major things that are keeping us in the system that we see as not changing?
Yeah. So it's hard to whittle it down to three, but I would say that the key thing is that the understanding of young people with special educational needs, both the kind of the academic and theoretical is out there, but education itself, the education system, is not as quick to respond to that up-to-date knowledge and understanding, even I would say within the special school sector. So then the fact that mainstream, it's not, they've got so many other things that they have to focus on. It's very slow to adapt and change over time. And because the national curriculum is placed upon us by government, you've then got things like government legislation and how long that takes, and all the money that needs to go into that to create change as well. So I think some of it is about understanding, knowledge and understanding. Lot of the knowledge and understanding I've gained over the years is through experience. So I think we've always had a very separate mainstream system to special school. We've got something coming out. We've had a consultation around something called the White Paper here in the UK. So that will be, they're going through looking at all of that, and it will come into effect, no doubt, in the near future. Some of that paper talks about how the relationship between mainstream school and special school needs to be created and developed and used to the advantage of young people through outreach and things like that. And something called Experts at Hand, where you'll have support and guidance from special school expertise into the mainstream sector, which will be helpful, I think, and beneficial. So hopefully knowledge and understanding improves over time. I think you've also got the fact that funding is, whilst there's money being spent, it's not enough, and it's for like pockets or buckets full of money to spend on certain aspects of inclusion for now, as opposed to that really huge investment that's sustained over years and decades, which is what it needs. So I think funding is the other issue. And I just think the people that are making the decisions at government level really don't have the true understanding of the issues or what needs to be put in place in order to solve those issues. And then beyond that, we've got the fact that society is so complex now, and the impact of things that are going on in the wider world really do impact the children that we're trying to support and educate within school. So yeah, there's a lot of challenge, but as we've said before, we need to be hopeful and we need to change the things we can change for the better.
Sure. And you already mentioned an initiative in which you are involved too, I hear. Just trying to like connect the system, right? These special schools, they know because they're doing this work daily and they've got results how to help children who need that help. So there cannot be just this division. There has to be better collaboration, learning from each other, which really should be a big part of teacher development. I always thought teacher should have the time to learn how to support all children. That should be the most amount of time that they should spend on beyond actual teaching. But the
Yeah.
question is, do they? Are they allowed to spend time on actually learning how to help all children? And I have a problem with that. And based on what I can tell. I'm not teaching in elementary school, in high school, but I know teachers who teach. So I hear things, I observe, and also based on being a parent, right? Whose kid just recently has graduated. But I wonder also if we can speak a little bit about that too. I teach in teacher preparation program.
Okay.
We have both. We have undergraduate degrees, so those who are doing bachelor's degree to become teachers,
Mm.
which takes you 4 years. And
Yeah.
I think it's a pretty robust program because we have a lot of field experiences, right? These people can go to schools, learn. I'm fine with that. And we also have master's degree for those who need to do the master's because New York State requires master's degree. So we have many of our students from undergraduate jumping into our literacy online program to do that. I have seen what's happening in schools, and I have then started seeing what's happening in teacher preparation programs. If you look at the courses these people take, everything but learning about how to teach growing population of neurodivergent children. Now we're talking now, and I was reading in your bio, there's kids who have growing anxiety and they might not even be labeled as special education students.
Oh.
And we don't teach much about that in that teacher preparation program. And because I see it in our pretty good teacher preparation program, I guarantee the same thing occurs anywhere else in the United States in teacher preparation programs, in England and in other places. It took 4 years to finish that degree, to get the
Mm.
initial certification and to become teachers. But how much do these people actually learn about how to help these kids? I teach about how to, bring a therapy dog to school and what influence it can have on kids with a variety of issues. But that's only because that's what I do. It's my passion, right? I happen to be
Yeah.
therapy dog handler. But in that regard, these teacher preparation programs are not progressing towards what we need. And what is your noticing as far as in England and maybe even in other places?
Yeah. So the same the same thing really, is that most of the teachers that we employ within the special school sector have come from a mainstream background. And it's the first time that they've set foot really into a special school. And much of the learning that they then experience is through doing. And it's through learning from the other staff that have been working in special school for years and years. And then you do, continuous professional development, and you do courses and you stay on top of all the learning, the academic research and things that's out there. But we've often said that really it should be the other way round, that you start off in special and
Right.
then you go into mainstream, so that you have that knowledge and understanding and that you can benefit those children that are in the mainstream sector that have special educational needs. It's really concerning, I think, and it's only in recent years that people have begun to question how separate the two sectors have always been. And it was also quite concerning that when they started talking about, the staff in mainstream having to have more teaching around how to support children with special educational needs in the mainstream sector, that they didn't initially look to the special schools as being a source of information there. And it
Right.
was, you almost had to say, hello, we've been, like you said, we've been doing this for
Right.
years, like decades. And
Yeah.
also there's been such a shift. The children, because I work in a moderate learning difficulties school, the children that when I started in that school 17 years ago, even 10 years ago, those children were no longer attending special school. Those children with those types of needs the decision had been made that they would be educated in mainstream. So you kind of just hoped that they'd be okay. The generations coming through, that they would be supported in the appropriate way, but they were definitely not getting the same type of education because mainstream and special were so different. And then we saw a real shift at that point in time where the children coming into our school became extremely complex in comparison. So we ourselves had to have a culture shift and do a lot of learning around how to meet the new cohort's needs that were coming in. And now we're seeing another shift again. So it may well be that this group, which in the UK is labelled as moderate learning difficulties, will no longer potentially receive education healthcare plans here. Therefore, they will be, all of those children, expected to be educated in mainstream. And my school will have to shift again to meet more complex needs, because we always support children that have an education healthcare plan. So there is this real, again, another shift. Yet in mainstream, there hasn't been the shift in that's needed in order to meet those children's needs. And that's the scary bit, I think, is that we're talking about this word inclusion and giving children a place in mainstream, but we're not really catering for them yet. And we need to do some work around that. And that's where I then decided to set up Wise Inclusion, because I wanted to be able to support those leaders in mainstream school to learn from the stuff that we've been doing for such a long time in special, and not just say you should do it this way, because it's a different context, different setup, different staffing requirements, different buildings and things like that. But to be able to sit and be a creative think partner around, within your context, how could you take some of what we do in special and bring that in so it's meaningful and works well for you in the mainstream sector in order to meet those children's needs better. I really also feel that so much of what we do in special, if it were to be done in mainstream, it wouldn't just benefit the special education needs children, it would benefit pretty much all children. It's definitely not going to harm them. So,
No.
but they need to know what they don't know, because I didn't know it when I worked in mainstream. I think I was a pretty good teacher of children with special educational needs, but with a mainstream head on, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. I didn't know what special school was like. I didn't know all the great things that work for children with special needs in the special school sector. But we can take that and we can kind of, I hope to be able to scatter that a bit across the mainstream sector to help the children and the staff, because it's hard being a member of staff in a mainstream school where you've not got the resources, the knowledge or the understanding to help those children, even though you really want to. And that's where I think it turns to luck. Like you said, it's just, if it happens to be a teacher that just gets it or just goes the extra mile. It's not because the system has been strategic in making that happen. It's just so much relies on luck in that
Totally.
regard.
What so that would be a good sort of headline, trying to we are mainstreaming
Mm.
the what we do in special education sector. That's what you're trying to really do. Trying to mainstream these practices because
Yeah.
they've been working, and like you said, they can really benefit a lot of children who are not labeled special needs, because that leads to differentiation, that leads to a lot of things that everybody will benefit from. If we could now switch gears a little bit, we already talked a little bit about it, about some success stories, or if you could give our audience some examples of practices, strategies, routines that from that special sector, in that sector work. And you also hear, based on your consulting, that they are starting to work in mainstream. That would be incredible to hear because we all can benefit from this.
Yeah. Okay. So I think one of the things that has been hugely innovative over the last few years that we've put in place within my special school is we've been one of the first in our borough anyway, not the first, but one of the first. And we've definitely got a certain setup that is quite different to the others of what we call satellite provisions. So prior to myself becoming head, when I was assistant head, I used to manage all the admissions for the school. So I talked to a lot of parents about what they wanted or needed from a school, and also a lot of parents that were really undecided as to whether mainstream school was appropriate for their child or special school. And when we kind of delved deeper into their uncertainty, it was around the fact that they were academic enough to be able to be entered at the end of their school career to do GCSE qualifications. And so their parents really wanted their to be aspirational for their child from an academic point of view, but they worried because social emotionally and from mental health needs, a big secondary school was not going to be the right environment to allow them to fulfill their potential. Often it would be around anxiety, and they may have had a diagnosis of autism or ADHD. And so there was a worry there about the environment, not the curriculum, not the academic pathways or the accreditation. It was all about the environment and about would they have that level of relationship in a secondary school, because here, I don't know if it's probably the same in over there, but they move from one teacher to another to another to another all through the school day. So
Yeah, the same
building
thing.
relationships
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
difficult in secondary school. So the parents were wanting to send their child to a school like ours because it's a smaller environment, more nurturing environment, fewer adults to interact with. They would get the extra support, the extra nurture, which would help them with their anxiety, therefore allow them to engage with their studies better. But we don't offer the same academic pathway and accreditation levels as the mainstream sector. So I sat with my head at the time and just said, it's just such a shame that we don't offer this, something that's in between. And I really do owe a lot to that head teacher who taught me that if it doesn't exist, you try and do it, you try and make
Yeah,
it.
that's right.
So, and she said, well, then let's be the ones to make it happen. If that's what the children need, let's see if we can create it. So she actually put in what we call an expression of interest to the council. And then she started to set up she found a head teacher at a mainstream site near us who's very dedicated and passionate about inclusion as well. And they started to shape and form a satellite provision, which I've been able to take that on, and it's been a privilege with the person, the head of the unit. And so we've got, by the end of next academic year, we'll be going up to 50 pupils in a satellite provision. It's set up in a very similar way to the main site special school, with really great staff who have huge experience with special educational needs, but the children get to go off with support at their pace, depending on what they are coping with or not coping with. They get to go into the mainstream school and access as much academically as they possibly can. And we're just about to go into our 4th year of having children over there, and they're outperforming similar ability children within the main school because they get that nurture, and the relationship is so, and we have staff there with the expertise and the understanding of special educational needs, and the children are just thriving. So this is something that is, I hope, will become far more commonplace across the UK. We're seeing in the white paper talk of something a little bit different, which is more the mainstream schools setting up provision.
Yeah.
Which I think is better than not, but I think the reason it's working so well for our children is because I'm overseeing it with my special school knowledge and hat on, and that all my staff are so knowledgeable and experienced around SEN, and we get the additional funding for those children that in the mainstream they won't quite get the same level of funding potentially. So, but that's been lovely to be a part of, and I hope we see a lot more of it in the future. And I just think what I often talk about is bend and flex, that even in my setting, we've had to incorporate bend and flex for children come through, and they may not be presenting in the same way as children that you've had in the past. So you have to bend and flex what you do and what your offer is as a school. Like my previous head said, if what we've been doing is not right for these children, then we change what we're doing. You just change, you adapt, and you become innovative. You look at what resources you have available to you, and you change what you do to meet the needs of the children in front of you. And I think that's, again, what we need to see in mainstream is that ability. And yes, it's brave leadership that's needed, but it's also having that confidence and understanding that if you do bend and flex to meet the children's needs, you're all going to be better in the longer term. But rather than trying to get the children to fit your mold that has been in existence forever because you don't want to change, and in doing that, you just exclude the ones that can't fit in that mold.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not inclusion, is it? That's
It's
where
not
I
inclusion, it's exclusion.
Exactly. So that's where I think there needs to be real motivation and belief that it's the adults that need to change, and it's the curriculum design and it's the way we design schools that needs to change now, because the children aren't going anywhere. So that, they either meet their needs or they don't. And I do think you've got lots of head teachers and leaders in the UK that are doing their absolute best to be brave leaders and change and adapt to meet the children's needs and be inclusive. I just think that they are lacking in funding and resources and staffing, and that is a huge barrier for them. So even where they want to change, they're just finding it so difficult.
But even based on the current system, so that means mainstream that acts like, okay, we do inclusion, which they don't. And then there is special schools like the one that you know, and now you basically connecting these two places and created this satellite provision. This is really cool. Is it one thing of this kind that exists? So for now, or there is multiple ones, or it's going to grow? You hope it will, right?
Yeah. So I believe there are a few versions of this
Mhm.
around the UK. Within my borough, I know of at least 4 or 5, probably even 6, relatively new. Definitely over sort of the last 5 years, they've been coming into existence. Each one is quite different though, because there's no kind of rule book as to what this should look like. Each head teacher or head teachers working together have come up with their own unique version of what they think it should look like. And then it's just trial and error. It's evolving over time. And then now, because you've got a few head teachers that have knowledge and understanding of setting up satellite provisions, they're sharing practice and ideas and, helping one another. But it is very new. And I suppose my worry is that there isn't an acknowledgement that the way these ones have been set up are very costly. And so my worry is that what we will see is a similar but not the same version that cost less is what will go across the UK. I believe that would be my thought of what's popping up now, and what seems to be the aim through the white paper to have bases within mainstream schools as opposed to, so the word satellite provision is quite rare.
It's amazing. Not many of them, like you said, every is a little bit different because just thinks differently. But that is what you have to do. You experiment with things to see what would be better. Yes, it is about cost, but you also said that it is very interesting how these kids, I would imagine they spend most of the time in a special school or most of the time in the mainstream, because you said they do quite well because they feel, I'm going to this mainstream school, blah, 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 and I learn here, but then I'm going to go back to my wonderful team in the special school, and they feel, I would imagine, safe, secure, and they feel like there's people who take care of them, right?
Yeah. However, what I would say is, because of the shared working arrangements between the staff that I have in the satellite and the staff that are in the mainstream school, this sense of belonging for both the pupils and the staff primarily is with the mainstream school. So they wear the mainstream uniform. They don't wear our uniform. They mix with all the children freely at break times, lunch times, with the option to come back to the satellite if they want to. But most of them spend their time with their friends in the canteen over at the mainstream school. The staff see the staff, I would imagine, in their mind as part of the mainstream school staff, and they share teachers. So some of the mainstream teachers come into the satellite to teach, some of the main satellite teachers go over to the. So from the perspective of the majority of the staff, I would say, and the pupils, they probably feel a greater sense of belonging in the mainstream school, because that's been intentional, because we want them to not feel different or separate to or
That's
other
right.
than. And there's a real, myself and the head of the mainstream are really keen to develop practice and shared practice, because it goes both ways as well, So when you've been in special teaching for so long, you do lose track of, how to really push those that are higher achievers through to fulfill their, aspirations for them as well. And so you have to stay on top of that as well to make sure that you are developing all children to the best of their ability within education. So there's a shared practice there, and a real a feeling that we're in this together, and that we're here to help and support one another to progress in our own understanding of supporting the children, all children.
That is actually very fascinating because, as you're saying, they feel like they identify with the mainstream school, and yet they get something, and it's not mysterious because they get something very special from the special education, from the special school. What is that special ingredient, or two or three of them, that you think makes this huge difference?
I would say it comes down to relationship being at the forefront of absolutely everything. We also have done a lot of work over the years on trauma-informed practice, and really being very child-centred, looking at reasonable adjustments for children and understanding of what their individual needs are and how can we shape what we do around that. And then I would also say it's that level of support for the families as well. The families are often, the families of disadvantaged children are often, as you would imagine, very disadvantaged themselves. So we don't just support the children, we support the families. And we've got another thing that was quite innovative that didn't start with us, but we've carried it on all through COVID. We moved to online, and then we've been doing it since. I've got a fantastic pastoral team, and they started something up called Multifamily Group, where they work with the families, with the children. And that's just brilliant, because you then have that joined up approach, and the child knows that they're cared for in a similar way with that joined up thinking with between home and school. And yeah, that level of care, I would say, as well as knowledge and understanding of different types of special educational need and how to adjust and adapt the way we teach in order to help them to understand and progress. So those are the things that we would hope translate into the main school more and more, the mainstream school.
Totally. And I would like to just know also the staff from special school frequently then communicates with mainstream teachers, how
Yeah,
because I think that makes a huge difference because essentially what these kids have, they have a bunch of advocates
yeah,
who work for them because in the mainstream school, yes, supposedly we do in inclusion. There is usually just one person who sort of like supervised special education, so to speak, and you don't have any advocates there. There is none. This person just directs the crowd, has a job to do, right, so to speak. But this is a totally different situation here, and I see how and why this works. And I believe that, I mean, this really shows what you can do. That things are possible to do to make every kid to give every kid what they deserve.
yeah,
And parents too, because like you said too, I mean, these parents often probably even give up on fighting for their children with the mainstream education because it's just so tough and everybody deals with their jobs and daily life and how you're supposed to get the strength to do all that, which is so difficult to do, and just an amazing thing to do. And we would like to eventually after some time hear, like, what how it progresses, how this
yeah,
initiative progresses, because that's going to be very interesting, and hopefully it's going to go in a good way, right? And again, this is not easy. Anything new you do, and it's always about money, like you said. Oh, yes. But what are your hopes and also for this project and maybe something else that you're doing, and what is your next move? I should say that,
yeah. So
right?
really, I suppose it's the stuff I'm doing around wise education, sorry, wise inclusion, because it's really lovely to be able to work with colleagues to do new things. We've had in my school as well, we a number of years ago changed how reward system to make it all around employability. So our children earn our own currency and they work in a shop and a bank and things like that. And it all ties in lovely. They have to go for interviews with us and then we send them a letter in the post. So we try to make it as real life as possible, building those employability skills. And that's brilliant. And then we set up a program similar to the satellite provision a few years back, which is around meeting the needs of our most complex children. And we created very bespoke packages but these are all things that they've been amazing to be part of setting those up and see the benefit for the children in the school that I run. But it's knowing that you could lift a version of that model and put it in any school and there would be benefits. And so that's where I feel really sort of keen to just have those conversations with as many other leaders as possible and try and support them if they're keen to set those things up in their school, just to know a little bit about what we did, what went well, what went less well, learn from our mistakes, think about the different children within their context and how they can adapt, and just be able to offer my services, I suppose, to support other leaders in doing those things and be a mentor to them. So that's why, in the main, I set up Wise Inclusion, but it is opening doors also since I set up Wise Inclusion to work in other ways, like with other professionals or
Yeah.
people that have set up things and that I've made contact to them through social media, with them through social media and different projects. So I'm doing one thing where I'm starting to look at supporting families and parents that are going through real crisis within the system and struggling to meet the needs of their own children. And then also through the work that I'm doing on EBSA, which is the emotionally based school anxiety, one of the provisions that I talked about previously that we set up for our most complex children ended up in part really meeting the needs of children that have that huge anxiety that started to refuse to come to school, which for us, our first experience of that was before COVID, but I've seen since COVID just that huge,
Yeah.
huge increase in children, particularly with diagnosis of autism, um, who have such high levels of anxiety that they cannot face going to school. And so I met another person online, an education consultant who specialises in EBSA. We've started to work together around improving the relationships, the working relationships between families and schools in order to better meet the needs of those specific children that are struggling with EBSA. So we're doing webinars and workshops and things like that. So I'm just keen to just talk about inclusion and just share what I've learned over the years to see if it can help anyone, really, anyone that is trying to improve education for children with special educational needs.
Well, thank you so much. That's a lot of projects, but also that is also your passion, and you're just so well positioned with all your experiences to be the leader within this field. We need leaders like that. And also we need leaders like that to be visible out there on social media too. I know it's hard work, it's another thing on the plate, but we need that visibility too, really. And I also hope that some parents also will pick up the advocacy too. I think we need more parents to be in this movement, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, unfortunately, we've had, because the system is so broken in many respects and full of challenge, the people that get to interact are the teachers or the leaders of schools and the families. And unfortunately, because things are so difficult and everyone is thinking about the children, there seems to be this conflict and a clash. I don't know if it's the same over there, but here definitely there is we've seen huge increase in complaints against schools for not meeting the needs of children with special educational needs. We've got real problems with the number of tribunals linked to educational healthcare plans, and it's become quite conflicting. That's really sad to see, and I've been in it. I've been part of trying to manage those situations as a head teacher, and worrying about my staff and the impact emotionally on their well-being to be regularly criticised despite their best efforts. But I also see it from the parents' point of view. Their children are everything to them. They mean so much to them, and they're going to fight to try and get what is right for their child. So I think that there's so much work to be done there as well around supporting both sides to actually come together in the fight for the children, because we all want the best for the children. And instead of, I suppose, turning on one another, which I do see through either conversations with other professionals or through interactions with parents on social media, myself, it is a time to unite, I think, to really fight for the children. We all know what they desire, and we should all together be fighting for that.
I think the unity would be absolutely wonderful. And towards the end of our wonderful chat, if let's say you would have a young teacher in front of you, and who's just became teacher, right, and have not learned that much about how to help special needs children, doesn't even know all the special needs, but they will find out once they get the
Yeah.
classroom and they get kids with maybe all kinds of challenges, and that's where so-called real world
Yeah.
enters their life. Could you give any tip to a teacher like that? I mean, they will be, so to speak, slammed with other things that the school will be doing, district initiatives, you name it. But what should they do to actually, if they want to stay in this profession, to become the best teacher they can be for every child in that classroom? Because I think that's what this is about. That's why I hope, chose that profession.
Yeah. So I would say every child is individual and unique. So always get to know that child in front of you and really learn make the effort to learn and understand that child and why they are struggling in the way they are struggling and why they're presenting in the way they're presenting. And then don't feel that you need to be the person solely to make that change that that child needs, because often it can be soul destroying to feel like everything's on you and that you need to be the one to fix this, because children don't need fixing, they just need support and care, and they need all of the adults around them to work together to give that child what they need collectively. So I talk to my staff about not feeling that you can make the change overnight, because often it will take the full 5 years of them going through our school before we can turn around and say, wow, we made a difference. And it's not one person, it's everybody. It takes a village. So I think have that shared responsibility as well to make the difference. Keep abreast of all the up-to-date knowledge that you can. Always don't feel you ever know everything. Always be ready to learn and find out. Then the other thing I would just say about is your own wellness. And in order to be resilient in this line of work, you have to look after yourself as well. And you need to not feel guilty about that. So I would always say that to anyone that chooses to become a teacher, is that you've got to look after yourself and care for yourself and have downtime in order to then come back another day and do the job as well as you can possibly do it.
That was just perfect. Thank you so much. And I can myself, take some of these tips because
Yeah.
I know that taking care of yourself does make a difference to build more that resilience and to sustain you in the profession, really, right? And that applies to any really profession, actually. So thank you so much. And you could tell our audience where you can be found on social media. That would be great.
Yeah. So Wise Inclusion, if you search for that, so it's Wise, WYSE. And then that's on Facebook, Instagram. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I also write a Substack. Any of those.
Thank you so much. And we will make sure to include these links in the show notes too. And today I really want to thank you, my wonderful, wonderful guest, Terri. She's doing some amazing things. It's based on not only knowledge and experience, but also some bravery, because you need some boldness and brave attitude to do these things. And I would like to invite our wonderful audience to, of course, let us know once the episode airs, like what you think about this, because this is a topic that many people should participate in, really. And it's not just teachers, not just administrators, parents, but anybody else who really cares about education and cares about actually real inclusion. Because
Absolutely. Yeah.
there is so much of these conversations going on also on some more professional maybe platform, if I can call them that way, like LinkedIn, about inclusion, about kindness. The whole LinkedIn is buzzing with these things.
Yeah.
Inclusion, kindness. But we have to infuse it in schools, actually, in ways that are authentic, real, and that can make change for children. So everybody should participate in these conversations. And of course, follow the show, Get Inspired with Dr. Barb, so you never miss an episode. And follow Terri. She's absolutely amazing. See what she's doing, her activity. I know she's very active. There's always something on the
Reactive.
Instagram
Yeah.
account, and not only.
Yeah. You can't shut me up. I'm always talking about inclusion and safety.
You gotta be active. Yeah. But thank you so much, Terri, for your advocacy, for your work. You are absolutely amazing. And anything we can do to support you, we will. I really appreciate this wonderful conversation. And bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much. Thanks for
You're
having
very
me.
welcome. Thank you so much.